Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude, and in which we are going to look at some very important developments in Central Asia, where Uzbekistan, a key player in Central Asian geopolitics, has decided to host two important events. One is a conference on Afghanistan, where a number of countries led by the US in the West and Russia and China on the other hand are all keen to find room for engagement with Afghanistan. And of course, there is the SCO meeting in Uzbekistan, where the Foreign Minister of India, amongst others, will be engaging with his counterparts. But to understand the importance of Afghanistan in this whole discourse, considering the fact that the world has not yet recognized the Taliban, we have with us a very informed observer of situations there. We have Major General B.K Sharma, who is the director of India's oldest military think tank, the United Services Institute, and has served as India's military advisor, military attaché in the Central Asian countries, has traveled extensively there, as well as he has been since 2016 part of an international dialogue group, which India has also been actively involved with. Some may call it track 1.5 diplomacy, but this has led the general to travel extensively in Afghanistan, particularly in the northern parts of Afghanistan, where it engages more effectively with Central Asia. So welcome on the show, sir. And the first question to you is, how can we see there being a room for engagement with Taliban, particularly in the light of the fact that very few countries have recognized Taliban, if at all? And here you have delegations from US, Russia, China, UK, France, Germany, Turkey, Pakistan, India, Middle Eastern countries, as well as the Central Asian countries and Indonesia, engaging with each other, trying to find a common ground to engage with the Taliban. Your views, sir.
Thank you, Maroof, for giving me this opportunity to come to this very important show. And I'll straightway come on to the question that very recently we'll have to see these two conferences, which has very recently been concluded in Tashkent. That was the conference on economy and security of Afghanistan, in which the acting foreign minister of Afghanistan has participated, along with 20 other countries that you just mentioned. And what was the essence of this discussion there was basically the stabilization of Afghanistan, in which world has increasingly come to recognize Afghanistan, Taliban as a reality and the need to deal with them. So therefore, now people are closing up, but there were certain areas of concern which were very clearly enunciated there. And one was that humanitarian, whatever the operations are being committed, that was one area. Second was, that the government should be inclusive, and that means there should be other non-Pashtun entities to be incorporated. Then women's rights. But at the heart of everything was that the world has to give this humanitarian assistance to Afghanistan, which is in the throes of a very big humanitarian crisis. And there is no point in sort of isolating Afghanistan, even if it is under Taliban, any further. Now, that was the central role, and I think much of this is also going to be discussed in the second meeting that is starting today. That is a precursor to the summit which is taking place in mid-September, the SCO summit. So the tone and tenor of that thing is also going to be what has happened in Ukraine and what is happening in Afghanistan. People today are talking more about, this North-South or Central Asia, South Asia connectivity, and in which Taliban have an important role to play. For example, Uzbekistan has come out with this proposal that they want to extend Haratan, Mazar-e-Sharif, Jalalabad, Kabul, further to Peshawar, and also get connected to the warm water ports of Arabian Sea. Similar interest has also been evinced by Kazakhstan, that they want to be a major sort of a participant in the construction of this railway line. Chinese have also been talking about extension of CPAC from Peshawar towards Kabul. So all these things are now happening. That means the connectivity has become the central piece of the geopolitics of Central Asia. On the other hand, because of the developments that have taken place in Eastern Europe and Russia's lack of access to Europe, I think more and more focus is going to come on to international north-south, to the transportation corridor, which is going from Bombay towards St. Petersburg. We can talk more about that. So,
okay. So you've covered a lot of ground, sir. Actually, you've gone on to my second question that I had for you, but I didn't want to stall the flow. The basic thing is that this conference has been looking at essentially two things. First was to engage with Afghanistan in a way to ensure that an economic, socio-economic arrangement can be put into place so that the people of Afghanistan would be as high as 30 to 40 million people are weaned away from some kind of arrangement that will stop them from the humanitarian and hunger crisis that they are facing, and simultaneously the transportation corridor. Now that you talk about the transportation corridor, this is the new one that has come into being. This looks quite favorable to Pakistan again. I have a problem with this corridor concept coming into Pakistan and beyond, because Pakistan was the one that the Americans were using to enter into Afghanistan, and the Pakistanis regularly blackmailed the Americans using that path they are providing. However, there is another transportation corridor that India has been working on, whether you call it the corridor via Iran or the Indian initiative of Chabahar and then through Iran and then into Afghanistan, which is likely to be a better idea unless the Americans are pushing for this line, for this corridor to even come via Pakistan, obsessed as they are to keep Iran marginalized and not ashamed as they seem to be of the humiliation that Pakistan has heaped on them for 2 decades.
See, you very rightly alluded to Iran being the linchpin of these corridors, the corridors which are actually bypassing Pakistan. Now, both these corridors, whether it is Chabahar, Ziranj, Dilaram, and on to Central Asia, or whether it is from Bombay to Bandar Abbas and then through Iran, through the Caspian, going towards Russia. So unless Iran is on board, these corridors cannot go through. Therefore, our strategic engagement with Iran becomes central. But there are more incentives which are now coming into being, and that is Russia. Otherwise, earlier was a little bit reluctant because Russia thought that there is a tilt towards Quad and other things. Now, because of Russia's pivot to Asia and what it is talking about developing connectivity and trade connections between its far eastern region and Asian economies, I think Russia and China both would be more and more interested in fructification of this north-south corridor, and that's highly beneficial to India. And we should also put our act together and see that we become an active participant in the actual operationalization of this corridor. This, together with our Ashgabat agreement, I think will give us enough space to be a competitive player in Central Asia, where otherwise, in terms of economic activity, China and Russia are far ahead of us.
Okay, so where does this leave the whole lot of 30 odd countries that seem to have now come in, and all of them are wanting to find a stepping stone into Afghanistan? Some of those, like the UAE, had continued to keep a mission functional in Afghanistan. But, I see in the list, the European countries and Turkey in particular wanting to play a bigger role there. And considering the fact that Turkey, Pakistan seem to be working more in sync than Turkey, India, where is it that India's relationship with the US, since the US keeps wanting to tell us to come to their side, where is it going to help us if we want this arrangement to go further ahead? Because US being loggerheads with Russia now, being in tension with China, and US obviously having marginalized Iran. I mean, what is it that we can expect from US vis-a-vis Afghanistan?
I would say US at the present juncture is left with a Hobson choice. They need America to balance out China. And that is why this amendment act that they have mooted is to give us that concession on COTSA, and also looking the other way around as far as our energy imports from Russia are concerned. So they would understand very well, and I don't think they can directly interfere in India's genuine strategic outreach towards Asia. I don't think we have to go too much into calculations as far as US is concerned. And I don't think they will go out of their way to needle India as far as our genuine aspirations is concerned. The question is that how do we build bridges with Iran? Iran is quite dismayed with India because we were not getting even a drop of oil from there. So our re-engagement and a very vibrant diplomacy with Iran is central to this. And I think in this endeavor, I think Russia today can play an important role to put us together. But what is more important, that given economic heft of India, the size of our market, this north-south connectivity can only become profitable if Indian markets and India as a country is on board. And we have certain advantages to that regard. That firstly, we enjoy tremendous goodwill in Afghanistan across different ethnicities there. Then we have a wonderful experience of working in Afghanistan on those 36 odd projects. And very recently, even Taliban leadership have started closing up to India. You look at Mullah Yaqub's interview with the CNN, and they went to the extent of saying that they are ready to send their people for training here in India. And then Mr. JP's visit to India and establishing a functional visit in Kabul. I think these are steps in the correct direction, but more and more vigorous diplomacy is required for us to create a niche for ourselves and to be on the high table. Like we were not earlier, we were not on the high table, we are on the sidelines.
Right, well put, sir, but we'll come back after a break. We are running a little out of time to look at, how much India can engage with the strategic heartland of Asia, that is Central Asia. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are looking at a major conference that has just happened in Uzbekistan, Tashkent, where they have looked at two issues. One is how to engage with Afghanistan for the sake of its people, not so much as to give respectability to the Taliban, because there is still a reluctance to recognize the Taliban. And at the same time, how much of a role that India can hope to play via not just the North-South corridor, but via the goodwill it enjoys in Central Asia, because Central Asia remains a strategically very important region. And it's not just its location, but its huge mineral and oil and energy resources. We have with us the distinguished General Sharma, Director of the USI. So, sir, how would you sum up the importance of Central Asia?
See, Central Asia is extremely important to us in terms of its bridge and buffer dimension. We are what you call part of Mackenzie's heartland, and we at the same time, we are also part of the spike man theory of what you call the rimland.
Yeah.
So therefore, our interests actually span both in the Indo-Pacific and in Eurasia. Now, our Connect Central Asia policy or Eurasia policy is very important. And therefore, because of our historical relations with Central Asia, we enjoy a tremendous goodwill there. Very recently at Isukul, there was a conference of the heads of states of Central Asia. And if you look at the tone and tenor of that conference, basically they were looking at a balancer that they do not want as part of their multi-vector policy to get totally intertwined with Russia or China. And they are looking at an external balancer. And that is where India comes as an external balancer. Now, the only limitation that we have is because of the geographic connectivity and the proximity. If we are able to overcome this problem of direct geographical connectivity, I think it's a matter of time that Central Asian will start gravitating more and more towards India, and we will create much more space there in Central Asia for us to serve our national interests. Earlier, we were not on the high table. As I said, that most of these formats, Troika, Troika Plus, India was on the sidelines. Now we are coming to a central stage, the number of summits that we did at the NSA level, then at the foreign minister level, and even prime minister's level. So India has started taking a sort of a leading role in shaping the strategic environment there. But more energy will have to go into it because it is not a very easy kind of a cakewalk. So more and more proactive diplomacy, pragmatic diplomacy, multilateral, bilateral kind of exercises, and then our ability to, fulfill whatever pledges we make. One critical area of weakness for us is that we are not able to walk the talk in some areas. So how are we able to walk the talk? That requires a lot of attention.
So I want you to elaborate a bit on this energy quotient as far as Central Asia is concerned. The Central Asian country, the stans, as some people refer to them, they seem to be having, at least by some assessments, an abundance of energy. But there is a counter argument that this abundance really has not fructified because of the limitations of export pipelines, as also much of that speculation was overrated. So if it's not energy, then what is it that Central Asia provides except a corridor for Russia to connect with this part of Southern Asia through the warm waters of Arabian Sea?
See, energy is extremely important. Similarly, these countries are very rich in rare earth metals. For example, uranium. Look at Kazakhstan. It has the second largest reserves of uranium in the world. It is the first, as the number one in the uranium production. And they did come to a help in terms of as far as our nuclear reactors are concerned. Similarly, there is this CASA 1000 project, which is actually tapping into the hydel power resources of Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. Tajikistan is number one in the hydel power potential. Kyrgyzstan is number 4. So we can also be beneficiary because we are a power and energy deficit country. Similarly, extension of TAPI, once there is peace and Taliban are on board, that extension of TAPI to Fazilka can also take place. One more wish list of Russia is to hook up their energy pipelines to the Central Asian pipelines, and some kind of an arrangement can be worked with Iran, bypassing, Pakistan, and some kind of a swap arrangement can be actually worked out with them. But these are all in the.
Okay, last quick question, sir. I think the biggest beneficiary of the importance that is going to Central Asia, investments there, and the engagement with a whole lot of countries there is probably going to be China. And if that be the case, where does it leave our fate, since we are obviously in confrontation with China?
See, China is already draining out a lot of energy resources from Caspian, right? We are coming nowhere. There is also a school of thought that even TAPI may get diverted towards China. So that's very much a risk factor there, that China is like a big elephant in the Central Asian calculus. Now, this is where our diplomacy and our sort of our strength will come into play.
Okay.
Otherwise, it will just become a glib talk if you are not able to put all these pieces together and have a very viable and sustainable Central Asia or Eurasian policy.
Okay, so that you've hit the nail on the head, sir. In fact, that was my earlier question to you, that I've been hearing this talk for more than 2 decades. And the TAPI as an idea itself has been doing the rounds for more than 2 decades. And you've provided an answer that it looks like the TAPI is going to head towards Kashgar, not so much as India via Pakistan. But that for another day. Thank you very much for your wisdom, sir. And thanks to everybody for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.